I seen Jordan Peterson live in Belfast, and this is my experience. So I seen Jordan Peterson live in Belfast. I got really, really good tickets. This was last year. Front row tickets, face to face. It was fantastic. Very, very good experience. Uh, as you know, Dr. Jordan Peterson's a very intelligent man. I took a lot from it, especially when it came to the aspects of working with your better half, relationships. I implemented a lot of things that he said that have worked, and I'm not surprised that they worked, and things that I needed to know. And it was brilliant. I felt like we were his patient. Like there was thousands of people in the SSE arena, and every single one of us were his patients. And he sat us down like a psychologist and broke us all down and made us think about our life. And it was really, really good. And I have to give him credit for that, because his stage presence, his wife was there too. She was fantastic talking about her life. She has a history to an ancestor history to Belfast, and she was talking about that. And Jordan came on, and it was really, really good. Really, really relaxed atmosphere. I enjoyed it, and I would definitely 100% go to see him again. But he got something wrong, and I don't think Jordan realized his audience. This wasn't America. This wasn't Australia. This wasn't England. This wasn't anywhere else in the world. Ireland is a very unique place. Now, this was Belfast in Northern Ireland, but this is the island of Ireland, regardless. And Ireland is very, very unique, especially when it comes to politics. And what do I mean by that? So, for instance, Ireland is very mature politically. So you've got America at the minute it's the police of the world. The way I see that is it's basically like putting your 10-year-old brother in in control of the house. You know, if you're looking at the American political system at the minute, very, very greedy and not doing right by their people. But Ireland's completely different. Ireland, yes, it has its political troubles, obviously, but when it comes to severe political troubles, we've been there, we've done that, and we've bought the t-shirt. Hence why we can weed out the rats. And when it comes to revolutions, like there is a bit of a revolution happening in Ireland at the minute, but it's like a noisy revolution, but everybody knows what to do. Everybody knows, well, that's the guy that you shouldn't vote for. They're the parties that we shouldn't vote for. So we're not going to vote for them, and we need to be heard. And that's the way Ireland works. We're also very immune to propaganda. Now, there's still going to be people that fall into the traps, but as a whole, as a majority, even the youth, even the people that would be considered the radical left, as Jordan says, they would still be immune to certain propaganda, and we're still nice to each other regardless. So when it came to one subject that Jordan spoke about, he talked about the paramilitary organizations. And I want you to watch a clip, because I'm not saying this is a banned live show that he done, but I don't think he's going to show this. I don't think he's going to put this out, because, as I said, this wasn't his crowd. He was speaking to people that have been through so many political, emotional, physical experiences that what he was saying was basically a night off for them. Everybody in that crowd, especially in the older generation, have went through a severe political storm over the past, say, 50 years in Ireland and prior. So to them, what Jordan was saying, they already knew. And then he came to the point where he was asked the question on the paramilitaries. And this is the point that you need to see. And as I say, I don't think he's going to show this. If he does have that in the schedule to show it, but normally Jordan records something and puts it out quite fast. This here, the clip that you're about to listen to, is a clip from a recording that somebody took from the back of the theatre. I was right up at the front. This is from the back, but he talks about the paramilitaries. And it's quite interesting, and he's wrong about this. He's wrong because, just to give context before you hear this, he talks about the paramilitary organizations as if they're gangs. And that's something I think he should have done a little bit of research on that before he talked about this. He talked about the paramilitaries as if they were gangs, and the only reason people join them is because they're looking for adventure, and he could not be more wrong.
Given the influence paramilitaries still have over young men in deprived communities in Northern Ireland, how would you reach out to them?
So before we start off here, I have to say there is still a heavy paramilitary presence in Ireland. Now, The paramilitary landscape in Ireland today from, say, maybe 30 years ago is completely different. Now, if we're going to just talk about the paramilitaries today, yes, there is an element to gang warfare and them moving away from, say, freedom fighting and fighting for the civil rights of their people to now moving into drugs and things like that. So, uh, when we're speaking about today's paramilitary organizations compared to yesteryear, chalk and cheese. So, I would agree with Jordan Peterson on the statement he's just about to make that if young people are looking for adventure, don't join the paramilitaries. I'm not promoting paramilitary organizations here. I'm not saying that you should do that, but I'm solely talking about the paramilitary organizations that existed in the past to fight for Irish independence and for the civil rights of the Irish people. Not today's version of the paramilitaries where it's just about drugs and warfare.
Look, I was standing in Montreal once, you know. Montreal's a great city. It's really sophisticated and it's beautiful and the food's great, and there are just festivals there one after another, jazz festivals and comedy festivals, and it's a blast, Montreal. It's super safe, it's a great city, you know. And I was living in Montreal in a relatively poor neighborhood, and I went to this outside mall and I saw this gigantic 17-year-old kid. This was back in like 1982, and he was dressed up in this punk outfit, looked like quite the monster. And he was standing there in this idiot mall, in some idiot shop, holding two pink shopping bags and looking like, oh my God, you know, like a complete anachronism. He's like 3/4 Viking, and he's standing there with like two pink shopping bags looking like a fish out of water. And I thought, you know, if somebody came up to that kid and offered him a real adventure, he'd take it in a second, even if it was dangerous. And so these paramilitary organizations, gangs and that sort of thing, that
So straight away, he's associating paramilitary organizations with gangs, and they're two separate things. Gang warfare and being in a paramilitary organization, say 1968, the Irish civil rights movement, when Irish people were being literally spat upon, and to be a Catholic in Ireland and to be an Irish person in Northern Ireland, the north of Ireland at the time, you basically had your civil rights just didn't exist. So, you know, jobs were low for anybody that was Irish. It was frowned upon, and just from personal experience, not personal experience, but experiences that were told to me, my grandmother was spat at for wearing an Irish brooch, and we weren't involved in any paramilitary organizations. My grandfather also drove the buses through Belfast during the conflict with Britain, called the Troubles. I don't like calling it the Troubles because it's not the only people that really troubled was the Irish people, Unionists too, and what he's seen was just absolutely devastating. You know, people on both sides getting murdered. He helped a lot of people, and whenever he passed away, we got cards from both sides of the community sent cards of condolences, and they were saddened because he never really, not that he didn't choose sides, he was a staunch Irish nationalist. He was for a united Ireland, but he wouldn't have seen anybody go hungry. But when it came to the paramilitary organizations, it wasn't so much to do with joining a gang or looking for adventure. You were forced into it because your country or your community at the time was being targeted at that time by the British or other paramilitary organizations. And you can see that as gang warfare, but it's completely different. It's territorial, yes, but completely different because you're fighting for your future. You're fighting for the land that you're on so then people can grow a good society and live in a good free society. You're sort of fighting for democracy because at the time, for an Irish man living in Ireland, especially in the north, democracy didn't apply to you. So that's the difference. Gang warfare, going out in the streets, shooting people because of drugs, because of drug debts, 100%. That's gang warfare. I don't condone that. But Montreal in Canada is completely different from Ireland. Seeing a punk rocker, big punk rocker that looks like a Viking somewhere on the streets of Montreal looking for adventure is completely different. That kid has choices. He can do whatever he wants in regards to life. But in Ireland at the time, there was very little options for the Irish people, and they had to fight for their freedom. And that's what they done. Now, I'm not talking about terrorism here, where innocent people get hurt, but I'm talking about tyrannical rule. And when a tyrannical force is put upon a society by another society, then you have to fight back. And Jordan himself is, not say a victim, but a survivor of tyrannical sort of force trying to be put upon him, especially in Canada under Justin Trudeau. But that comes under the takes the shape of far left politics. So tyrannical force, tyrannical rule, monsters take every types of form. But when it came to Ireland, the Irish people had to fight, and that wasn't gang warfare. That was paramilitary. It's literally in the name, paramilitary, not gang. And the Irish people didn't see the British military as their military. They were fighting for their land, fighting to get their land back, because this is Ireland. Now, it's a good job that the fighting stopped. The Good Friday Agreement came in. The agreement was signed. There was people let out of prison. So, you don't really see a lot of that in gang warfare where there's an agreement signed. Yes, there might be things to do with trials and dates, but during the Good Friday Agreement, when it was signed, people that were in prison for paramilitary activity, they were let out of prison because it was recognized that they were in a war. That's not gang warfare. That is you taking a stand against a tyrannical force that is taken over you, and it is asserting that a tyrannical force over you. And there's something inspirational and motivational about that. So I really need to make that clear, and I want you to understand that. So he's wrong here, and there's a big difference between a young lad in Montreal that has never faced any real tyranny to a young lad that's 16 years of age in Belfast, where there's bombs going off, and he needs to join the resistance to get his land back. So we really need to be clear about that.
Lifestyle that's associated with quasi-criminal rule breaking, let's say, maybe hypothetically devoted to a higher cause. It's unbelievably attractive to young men who are looking for an adventure. Well, they have to find a better adventure. And they're not going to find it in a kind of stultifying security. If you're attracted...
I'm sorry to pause that again, but I have to pause this. Well, this is the thing. I agree with him that if there's any young people out there that are looking for adventure and they think to themselves, well, I'm going to join a gang to get that adventure instead of joining the army or doing something fulfilling with your life. I agree with him on that 100%. But whenever you're living in a society and you're living in a place where you're 16 years of age and you don't even have that opportunity, it's 1968. You're in Belfast, you're a young Irishman, you're a Catholic. You go for a job, you're not getting the job because you're a Catholic, you're Irish, your name says it all, how you speak says it all. Well, you don't even have the ability to go out and seek a career where it's going to fulfill you, because everywhere you look, there's just somebody not giving you the job because of who you are. So then you're forced to join organizations like the paramilitary organizations. So then you have them opportunities, and the future generation has them opportunities. And I think Ireland is very unique. There's a lot of books about Ireland and about the conflict with Britain, but one thing that's never really spoke about is the fact that there was these paramilitary organizations, loyalist, British and nationalist. And these paramilitary organizations, like, say, the Republican side of things, my side of things, they somewhat accomplished what they wanted to achieve. Now, they didn't get a united Ireland, but they definitely got the civil rights back for the Irish people. So throughout all the murdering, throughout all the killing, and throughout the terrorism, because there was terrorism, because it brought terror upon the people, the Irish people got their rights back. And we now live in a society in 2024 where the Irish people are thriving. We're thriving so much. We're the majority in the north. And if it came to, say, a referendum in the future, in the next 5 to 10 years, then there's a good possibility that we would vote for a united Ireland. And that, to me, is progress. So the paramilitary organizations, the Republican ones anyway, weren't for nothing. So that needs to be understood here.
To that sort of thing, if you're attracted to false adventures, and that would include drinking, for example, which is definitely a false adventure, you haven't taken on enough burden in your own life. You know, you should be trying to do something that's so difficult and worthwhile that you don't have any time left over for foolishness. And that's right there in front of you, man. The world is full of problems to solve, and one of the things you have to do with young men, for young men, is to call them to adventure. Say, look, kid, of course you need a higher order meeting. It's no bloody wonder that Andrew Tate is attractive to you, for example. You want to be a brain-dead, overweight loser languishing in the basement somewhere doing nothing?
The funny thing about this is, whenever he was saying this, there was a guy in the front row that was extremely overweight. And I remember him sitting down and he looked directly at the guy. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because sometimes people need to hear that. But you need to understand, when you're sitting in the front row and you're watching Jordan Peterson, he's got a presence about him, and he's walking up and down the stage, and he's got this big frame. He's not overweight himself, but he's got this very dominant frame, and he's controlling the crowd, and it's fantastic to watch. I have to give him credit for that. But once again, I have to regurgitate this again. If you're talking about the modern day paramilitaries and young people joining the modern day paramilitaries, I totally 100% agree with you. There's no need for it, because we can do things politically now. You know, we've got our civil rights, we've got our rights, we can do things in a democratic way. But if you're talking about the past, then definitely not. And I won't even have anybody argue with me on that, because I was born in 1987. I was born and I seen the political landscape and the physical landscape prior to the Good Friday Agreement, and how that was, where you had the Shankill butchers and butchering young Catholic men, literally butchering them. And then on the other side of that too, you had the paramilitary organizations creating terror for the unionist communities, where there was bombs going off, and there was lots and lots of different unionist innocent civilians killed because of that, which we can't condone. But without the paramilitaries of the past, we don't have we don't have the democracy that we have today. And that's why I think it's unique. I think that's why Ireland's very unique, because a lot of places around the world that have paramilitary organizations, let's take South America, countries in South America, for example, they have paramilitary organizations that take over, and then they don't allow democracy. In this case, the paramilitary organizations signed the Good Friday Agreement, put down their weapons, people were released from prison, and then democracy flourished. Regardless if, there's going to be a lot of people watching this saying, well, disagree with me on a couple of things here, but democracy flourished. So that's where Ireland is unique. And that's where, if Jordan Peterson's talking about the paramilitaries of the past, unionist and Republican, loyalist and Republican, then he's definitely 100% wrong. But if he's talking about the modern day paramilitaries, there's no need for anybody young to join them. And I agree with him on that.
At least people like Tate offer this fighting narcissism that compels young men out into the world. Now, it's not the highest order calling, but it's not giving up, self-castrating and dying. Well, there's much more to life than false adventure. And the trick to that, in part, is responsibility. You want an adventure? Here's an adventure. Tell the truth. That's an adventure. You have no idea what will happen if you tell the truth. You'll be shocked non-stop. And there's no difference between that and an adventure. And take on responsibility. And if you tell the truth and you take on responsibility, you'll be busy enough so that foolish false adventures, gang membership and the like, paramilitary adventuring, that's just not going to be even in the same category as interesting. And that's a much better vision.
Well, once again, we'll have to be able to differentiate here between Andrew Tate and gang warfare and paramilitaries. You've got Andrew Tate, who is Andrew Tate. Okay. That's not young people looking for adventure. That's a TikTok, YouTube, social media algorithm where maybe young men are attracted to that because he's got a certain amount of masculinity that they want. But when it comes to gang warfare, criminal activity, 100% I disagree with that. We're talking about the paramilitaries of the past. It was needed because, for instance, if there was a civil war in America, we can see the political landscape in America. If the Democrats, say, are getting very tyrannical in America, if they start taking everybody's guns away, and the American people can't fight back against a tyrannical force that the Democrats have inserted, well, then you're going to need a paramilitary organization to come in there to gain control again. So do you see what I've done? Do you see what I mean there? It's what is a paramilitary? Well, if there's a tyrannical force that is exerting tyrannical control over you, you have the ability to fight back, and you now become a paramilitary. And you get paramilitaries everywhere. There's paramilitaries in America ready to go at any moment, knowing that, if the government tries to control them even further, they're going to fight back. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's there, and that's what a paramilitary is. There's paramilitaries all around the world, and sometimes they're needed and sometimes they're not. But what I'm trying to say is Ireland's quite unique because the paramilitary organizations respected democracy. And when it came to 1998, they respected democracy and realized, well, we've got our civil rights. We don't have Northern Ireland, but we can fight for that in the future politically. And that's where Ireland's unique. And if it wasn't for those people, the young people today wouldn't have the ability to watch Andrew Tate on a phone. The young people today wouldn't have the ability to vote and to be lazy and to moan about things, because people in the paramilitary organizations died for our right to do that today. And in some case, they weren't really a paramilitary. They're the military of Ireland. So that really needs to be established here.
And it's right there in front of you. I mean, if you want an adventure in your own life, just try telling the truth. Man, all sorts of weird things will happen to you so fast it'll make your head spin. And that's right there in front of you. That plus responsibility, man, that's an unerring adventure. So that's better than violence. Even though maybe you could make the argument that violence...
Well, telling the truth can lead to violence. So let's take us back to 1968 in Ireland. I'm a young lad, I'm a Catholic, and I can't get a job anywhere because they're not giving me a job because I'm a Catholic and I'm Irish. And I start telling the truth about that. And I go to the newspapers. There is an article printed in the newspaper that this young man can't get a job. That then can lead to violence towards me. In 1968, that could have led towards violence towards me. So telling the truth in tyrannical situations can lead to violence. So it's necessary that you eradicate the tyrannical situation so then you can allow democracy to come in and flourish. And at that time in 1968, right up through the conflict, it was very, very hard in both communities. And then people came to realize we can't do this anymore. So telling the truth is good. Yes, tell the truth, but you need to also be able to tell the truth. But back in 1968, the Irish couldn't tell the truth, or more tyrannical control would have been asserted to them. Death, probably, imprisonment. So that's where we need to be able to tell the difference here and differentiate between living in a society where you can tell the truth and living in a society where you can't, or just one side can. Do you know what I mean?
Violence and the capacity for violence is in itself preferable to a nihilistic suicidality. That's one form of hell compared to another. but it's nothing compared to the real thing. So that's why we had.
Well, there's more of a shout of nihilism today in Ireland than there was back then. There was a lot of people that had a really strong faith in God on both sides. It was more, there was more anarchy, but I would say there's more of a shout today in this peaceful time. And I think maybe that has got to do with the bonding of the world because of the internet, because there's a lot of people in Ireland, a lot of politics in Ireland now that mimic American politics and vice versa, and so on and so on. We're living in a very similar political atmosphere, even though that I do feel Ireland's a little bit more mature politically. And I don't know what that is. It's quite a strange one. But once again, I'll have to break that down in a different video. But maybe that has got a lot to do with Ireland going through extreme violence. When you go through extreme violence, it leaves a ripple effect through society that it can't be explained. I'm seeing people today, I speak to people today that lived through it, the height of it. I seen bits and pieces of it. I was born in 1987, and I seen bits and pieces of it, and it wasn't nice. But the people who were in the mix of it, that were there, that I've spoke to, they've got severe complex PTSD, just outright, I don't know what, conditions that go far beyond PTSD. And it had a lasting effect. And you can see that. And you can see that even in the unionist community, in the nationalist community, that no matter what, nobody wants to go back to that. I don't hate you that much where I want your whole family to die. Okay, I disagree with you politically. I don't want to be involved with Britain. I think Ireland should be united, but I don't want your whole family to die because of that cause. That's where Ireland is right now.
Religious education to the degree that it was ever successful. You know, it was an enjoinder to adopt the most difficult possible of pathways, because that's what a religious adventure is. It's the most difficult of possible pathways, right? And so you don't need false status and that bullying narcissism if you have the real thing. And young men need to know that. And if you explain that clearly, they figure it out pretty quickly.
That applies to modern standards. I 100% agree with Jordan in that, but previous standards, I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but I'm going to, because I think it's necessary, because the same logic applies to everything that he's saying. That false status, well, I wouldn't say, if we're going to take that logic and not apply it to modern terms, but apply it to previous and yesteryear, then I would say there was no false status, even from the Loyalists and the Republicans. If you earned your status within the paramilitary organizations, it was earned. It was well earned. Whether that be a good thing or a bad thing, it was well earned. So false status, did young people join paramilitary organizations back in the day to get false status? They probably did, to be totally honest with you. They probably did. But was there any other opportunities for them? No, because they lived in a tyrannical system. They lived in a hellhole. So yes, they might have got short-term gratification from paramilitary organizations that fulfilled some evolutionary need, possibly, but it was also for a better cause than, say, let's talk about modern day society fighting for some far left cause that doesn't mean anything. Fighting for, saying that we're going to fight for the civil rights of a community that already has civil rights, that already has all the rights and even more rights. That's completely different from 1968, Belfast, Northern Ireland, where these people literally had no rights. They were not getting jobs. They were frowned upon. They were spat upon. And that's something that really needs to be understood here. Was there false status in it? I'm sure there was, but there was also earned status. And if you know how the paramilitary organizations were ran back in the day, it was ran like a military operation. You just have to look at any unionist, loyalist talking about the IRA back in the day. The IRA were always 10 steps ahead. Even the British military said it was hard to keep up with them. They're considered the greatest guerrilla warfare tacticians that have ever lived. Now, that's not, I'm not praising that. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but they done that for a reason. They became that good for a reason, because the Irish people did not have their civil rights, so they were needed. And as soon as the Irish people didn't need them, they laid down their weapons, and there's something to be said for that.
Try it for a month and see what happens. You know, I've had thousands of young men come up to me and say, well, you know, I started to take responsibility and started to tell the truth, and boy, things just got way better real fast. And you know, I was homeless or I was in jail 3 years ago, and now I have a job and I have a girlfriend and I have a baby and I have a house. It's like, I don't know what's going on. It's like, well, you know, that's a hell of a lot better than the false braggadocio of paramilitary gang, even though that in itself is better than infantile dependence. So,
well, I just have to react to what he said there. You know, I really don't think Jordan understands the concept of paramilitaries, especially in Ireland. Now, once again, just for to say this again, if you're talking about modern paramilitaries, I totally agree. There's no need to be joining modern day paramilitary organizations. There's no need for it. You don't need to do it, because you can, if you want to change something, you can become a politician. There's actually an outcry for good politicians in Ireland at the minute, because they seem to be all corrupt. They've took a leaf out of the American book. But if we're talking about the paramilitaries of yesteryear, it was needed. These people died for their land, and I actually don't like calling them paramilitaries. I like calling them our military, because without them, I wouldn't be here today. Without them, I wouldn't have the rights that I have today. And I owe a great service to the Republican paramilitaries, because they shaped what I know today. And I genuinely believe without them, the Irish people would still be in a situation where they didn't really have any civil rights. Right, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? And make sure to smash the like button and subscribe and hit that notification bell and share. If you're watching this on any other platform like Rumble or X, make sure to give this a retweet and a heart. If you're watching this on Rumble, give this a rumble. Just a recap on what was spoke about here. So, you know, I respect Jordan. With that speech that he done in the SSE Arena, it really, really helped my life, especially when it came to my wife. There was one thing, and I'd really want to end it in this note because it's a very positive note that he really helped me with. He talked about a thing about giving your other half the little wins. And that was something that I wasn't doing in my life. I'm the eldest of 5 brothers. And when you grow up in a male dominated scenario, it's always about winning. Everything's competitive. Christmas Day is competitive. So it was hard for me then I'm in a long-term relationship, 15 years with my wife. Love her to pieces. We've got a son. Love him to pieces. I love my life. But when it comes to debates, you know, I've got that deep-rooted that if I know something and I know it's right, then I'm going to insert that, and I'm going to make sure that that other person knows that I'm right. And when listening to Jordan, he said, look, you're going to find yourself in these scenarios where your other half is going to be wrong. And I had this conversation with my wife, and she does the same thing with me now, and we'll live a lot happier. And I will know that I'm right, but I know it's not going anywhere. She's stubborn or she's not listening to me. I'll give her that win. And that gives her the sense of relief. Do you know what I mean? And it's a reward-based system in the relationship that is needed. And we've spoke about it, and she's done that with me on certain things, because she's a Scouser. She's from Liverpool. We all know what the Scousers are like. And she's adopted that. And that's helped me an awful lot. So going to see Jordan Peterson helped my life. And there's no getting away from that. And once again, just to regurgitate it again, if Jordan Peterson talking about young people joining paramilitary organizations today, I totally agree with him 100%. There's no need for it. But if he's going to apply that same logic to paramilitaries of yesteryear, he's totally 100% wrong, because the paramilitaries from years past, the Republican paramilitaries, fought for my civil rights, and they got my civil rights, and they allowed democracy to flourish. So I owe a great amount of gratitude to the people who fought for the Irish people, died for the Irish people, and allowed this beautiful society to flourish and to become what it is today.